Hi friends, it's Marie.
I'm Helen.
Helen is here at Living Felt. She's been filming a new class for us, for the school actually, Felting Tutorials, and she's going to be teaching how to make this incredible 2D landscape. Tell them what it's called, Helen.
Autumn Creek.
And where the inspiration come from?
From a photo I took near my house.
It's a really fantastic class. She's going to take you through step by step. And as it happens, Helen has many, many years of experience with framing.
I helped frame my father's artwork when he had shows, and actually we had a show together. That was fun to work on together. And then I wanted a part-time job, and I got a part-time job in a frame shop. So now I have professional framing experience.
Yeah, and that's what she does now, in addition to doing her art and being a dog mom. So we're going to look at some pieces that we've collected over time and have yet to mount or frame. You know that we have done a few segments where we've talked about mounting or framing your art. These are some really special pieces to me, quite honestly, that have been gifted or come into my life in some way. So we're going to go over the pieces that you see on the table and get your input on matting them and framing them and maybe just some little nuances that might be unique to an individual piece. And hopefully this will help you in framing or even planning your pieces before you make them so that they're ready for hanging and mounting. We're going to be looking at these pieces that we've already shown you, and we've brought together just some things from our own collection. So we have fiber from here in the shop, along with felt pieces here in the shop, and Helen's going to contribute to the conversation. Some of these she's already picked out, but she's going to give us her ideas on why she thinks those colors might be good matting or backdrops or frame colors. So we'll be using fiber for that, felt for that. We'll be looking at some different mats and learn about considerations for those. And we'll also just look at some frames we have on hand. All of these things we will use for our ideas and conversation, and then we'll be taking them to the frame shop so that we can see how our ideas pan out. All right, so Helen, the first piece I have here was a piece made by a fellow teacher, Anna Repke, who did a sunrise sunset in the school, and she always seems to make these organic edges. And I chose it because it's a wintry piece. I've had it for a long time, and I had a plan for it for a long time and actually could never go through with it. So I think it's because maybe my plan wasn't a good idea. So let's talk about what you see when you see this picture and what we might use as a backdrop, because let me say I want to frame it so that the organic edges show. So what do we do?
So we would suggest to mount it on top of a mat board or fabric. And if you're thinking about mat board for this one,
yes,
we want something that will make the edges stand out. So I wouldn't choose a light color.
Okay.
We've pre-chosen some colors here. And first we'll look at this one to see how we feel about it. Because you don't know until you try it.
Right.
Because this color relates to what's going on.
Yes, it does.
And it will matter what color frame you choose on the outside and also what color your walls are.
Sure. I think you and I look at this immediately, and I originally thought that I was going to choose like a nice cool background for it, but I'm not sure that it has the drama that I see in this piece.
Right.
Like this piece has a lot of contrast, and I'm thinking maybe we go somewhere in here with one of these two.
Let's look at one of those.
Go try the copper?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that.
So the copper is, to me, a little competitive. I think it's too, it's got too much pigment.
It's too warm.
It's too warm and it's too intense.
Gotcha.
So I think it competes with this too much. This is so lively and interesting, and I think it takes away.
I agree. It's bright. It's kind of bright. So it's warm and bright, and it kind of competes, but I'm really leaning towards the chocolate.
Let's see how the chocolate looks.
Okay.
I think the chocolate looks great.
Yeah, because it's intense. It's an intense color, but it's not bright. It really, the picture pops up off of it. And I really like all the contrast in this piece from really white to dark, and I think it's very cool.
And it relates. You still see these dark browns in the image.
I like it. Now we're talking about the spacing of the matting, so let's focus on the bottom, where there's the bottom in this edge where there's the most variegation. How much space do you recommend we leave, on the largest side? For matting this, like, do we need this much space. Is that how much space we should leave?
Your framer will be measuring from the longest part.
Yes.
So this is the longest part down here and probably up here.
Okay.
So this is going to be the length. I would add 2.5 inches from the longest length at this point.
2.5 inches. So it's going to kind of look like this on the bottom and this here. It's going to be a very big mat, right?
It will be a pretty big mat, but 2.5 really isn't that big. Mm-hmm. This is probably 1 3/4 or 2 to compare. So it's similar. This is going to make it feel a little bigger. And your frame will cover about 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
So that's another consideration.
Okay. Okay. So then looking at that, that's our background. And then let's look at some frame options. We brought in, this is going to be a little difficult for people to visualize, but this is like an off-the-shelf kind of a frame, and it's a little barnwoody. It's even a little cool. It's not very warm.
You could set it on top.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
To get an idea of how these relate.
Yeah, and although it's rustic, I don't really see the colors in this frame in this piece. I mean, maybe this a little bit in the sheep, but I'm not feeling a great harmony. Like this starts to look like a different kind of green almost, doesn't you think?
I do, and you also want to consider where is it going, what the wall color is going on, and what else is on that wall. So you have to take all that into consideration.
Okay, yeah. I agree. And that aside, Jordan brought in this other cool frame. And the thing I think we like about this frame is that, and not this frame, but like this style of a color of frame. The thing I like about it is it's cool. It does really kind of match the sheep, actually. Looks really good with the sheep. But I like that it's modeled. And I think we were talking about that being kind of interesting. So maybe something with some character to it.
Something with some visual interest to kind of echo.
Whether it's this color or a brown or something, but something
maybe
with
a goldy brown or a brown with just a little variation in it.
Okay, and then let's look at a black one, which I definitely have a lot of black frames in my house. And I like the contrast of the black frame. I like how, because there's so much black, in the piece as well, and the accent. It does feel a little serious. Like the picture isn't all that serious.
I like the color. I would just choose something with a little more character. Something maybe with some shape to it, or even flecks of another color.
Okay, so a different surface design and maybe a different just structure, shape. Okay.
Maybe even thicker.
Yeah, I agree. I did, because the mat's so big. It seems like the frame should be a little wider. Okay, so we're going to take these notes for this piece, and then we're going to go to the framer outside of here in the studio, and we're going to look for probably a dark background for this, and probably we'll look at black or brown frame with some interest in it.
I would say
see how this piece goes.
Bring your brown sample with you to the frame shop.
Yeah, for sure. We'll put these. In fact, we'll pin these two together so we take them with us when we go to the frame shop. See how it comes out. Cool. This next piece we have is another really special one for me. Helen, this was gifted to me from a lady in Ireland, like in 2009 or 10. I mean, that's how long I've had it and wanted to do something special. I want to do this one like the last one we did, like floating. I want to show the organic edges. And I'm thinking for this piece that I would like to actually go with the brown again, because she's got these great little seed, ends here. To mount this onto the brown linen, I'm going to fuse it. In the beginning, I was taught how to sew things through the back and stitch it all the way around, but now we have fusible web, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'll fuse it to the linen. What color frame do you think I should use for this?
I think a white one might look nice.
Yeah, I agree. This is our strongest, like our two most extreme colors. Okay, so let's check that out. Now, that's about how it would look in a white frame.
So I might choose a frame that had a little more interest in it, maybe some waves, some shape to it, or maybe even some ivory or brown.
Off-white. Yeah, I would like one that's maybe distressed.
Yes.
A little distressed. I think that would add a lot of character. And how much space? I mean, this seems like a pretty good amount of space. Is that okay? Because the other one you said like 2.5 inches. Does it need to be that far from the edge when it's floating? What's your advice on that?
That's a personal choice.
Okay.
I like to at least have it bigger than the width of the frame that you choose.
Okay.
That's my
The mounting should be
of it.
bigger than the frame.
It's not a rule, it's just a feeling.
Okay, so we can look at that when we look at the frames that were there. So for this piece, we're going to go with another brown. The difference is we're going to go with brown linen fabric, and we'll fuse it to that, and we're going to look for ourselves a white frame. Now with this piece, Helen, another thing is I have this this documentation that came with it. So I took off the sender label and this little note from Valerie. So how would you suggest I preserve this paperwork along with the piece?
So after it's framed, on the back, we can make a pocket that can hold, we can custom size it to hold the documents that you want to keep inside that will always be with the piece and
Okay,
travel
cool.
with the piece.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, we're going to make a pocket.
So you start with 8.5 by 11 typing paper if it's enough for your document. Usually it is, because your document's usually folded. And you want enough sticking up so that it's easy to grab. You don't have to dig for it. This part doesn't matter as long as it's enough to hold it in. It can be as low as down here. And fold the sides in with a little room so you're not fighting to get it in and out. Double side this part to here. And go here. And then you can place your document right in the middle. And now you have a pocket.
That's fantastic. What a great way to preserve something to do with that piece. Very cool.
So we have some interesting pieces here.
Yeah, this piece was a gift from Laura Ricks. So
Beautiful.
It's wonderful, and I want to take it to the next level. She gave it to me in this black embroidery hoop, which is fantastic, but I would like to frame it. And then this was just our little Hidden Lake series, and I bought this inexpensive frame on Amazon that has these really weak, honestly, elastics on the back. So what ideas do you have for round pieces?
Well, I actually did a lot of research to try and find some professional looking fancy round frames, and I found that Jerry's Artorama has a selection that goes down from 5 inches to 12 inches, I believe, in 4 different colors. And they're really high quality, beautiful wood frames, and you can buy the glass for them separately on Amazon.
Okay.
And it's not glass, it's plexiglass, and it comes in packs of 4 or 12.
And then will the piece be touching the plexiglass?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a concern or what? I mean, I have opinions about that because I have so much framed art. And yeah, some is touching, some is not. I'm like, whatever, as long as it's here until I'm done with it, fine. But tell us.
For those frames, the lip underneath the inside of the frame.
And this is not the frame,
This is
but
not the frame,
this
but
is one that
it's
was
an
brought
example.
in. Yeah.
There's not enough room to put something that actually has something to keep it away
This
from
has a lip.
Yeah, that's the lip that the Jerry's ones don't have.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this would keep it away from the glass, this
Yes.
lip. But the ones that I'm suggesting don't have that. And I have a piece framed that way, and it doesn't bother me. I'm more concerned about it being protected from the environment that I have it hanging in.
Right, right. The preservation of the piece is more important, right, than it touching the glass. So really, it is your choice. I know that there's suggestions that there should be space, between the glass and the picture, and I know that I have felt in my house, touching the glass, and I've never had a problem with it. And it's kind of humid here in Austin, and in the summertime, we've not had an issue. But that is what I want to do with these two pieces: is hang them in a circular frame. And do you see circular mats?
I see circular mats that will fit in a square frame.
Okay, got it.
So that is another option, and you might think of hanging that in a diamond shape.
That's really cool.
Instead of the traditional square.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah. And now Jordan brought in a frame as well, and this is actually a record frame that she got at Hobby Lobby and is rather inexpensive, used for hanging records. And I think, Jordan, you said they're CD sizes as well as record sizes. So the difference with that is we've noticed that the glass is not removable. So just something to check out if that matters for you. If you want your piece hanging without the glass barrier, then just consider that before you make the purchase.
But the Jerry's ones you can use without glass.
Okay, and so we're going to be sharing the links for for everything that we're doing. We're going to give you a resource document for today of where we got everything once we finish hanging and mounting all of our pieces. So look on the supplies page for the reference materials, and anything that is purchased outside, which is all the framing materials, then we'll give you links to those. This next piece, it's a wonderful little piece of art that I fell in love with and was actually gifted to me by Helen. So Helen, I love these koi. I think you got the movement just right, and they are absolutely beautiful. And I love the colors that you chose, the soft white and pale grays and oranges. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us, I really want to frame it like sooner rather than later. So you picked out some fibers here from the floor. Tell us about what we might think about when we go to the frame shop.
You might want to ask for matte colors that are in this family and look at combinations of maybe using two mattes together and maybe changing which way they go. And if we brought a mat over, we could talk about a layered look. So if we had one color underneath and one color on top, you could decide which way they might go. You might use a lighter one for a more neutral look. I kind of like that combination.
Okay.
Or that. This I think, now that I see it. I think I like that combination.
Okay, so we go to double mat. So the inner mat is a little more narrow, and the outer mat is a little brighter, broader. And then, but we don't go white. We stick with colors that are already in the fishies. You like the dark color next to the piece. And then, what about a frame color? What do you think for that?
I was thinking gray.
Okay, so like a dark gray. So these colors bordered by a dark gray frame.
I think that is a nice complement to the piece.
Okay, and when we talk about size, so is this size of mat about the size we should be looking at for this piece?
I think it fits pretty nicely.
And now, as I'm scooting this around, the piece doesn't quite fit underneath the mat. They're going to cut this to fit exactly, right? So they have room, but tell us about leaving space around the subject. You were talking to us about that and how they're going to secure this piece when they do mat it for us.
So when they secure a piece that's going to be under a mat, they're just going to try and pull it taut so it lays flat, and they'll secure it down a number of ways. It could be double-sided tape. It might be corners, depending on the frame shop. And in this particular instance, I know I should leave at least a half inch, quarter inch. The frame should cover 1/8 of an inch at least. The mat.
Okay.
The mat or the frame will cover at least 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
So you don't want your design to go so close to the edge that it gets crowded.
Right.
So it's something to think about when you plan your design on your felt.
Right. I think this looks great, looks great in the mat. And so we'll look at these colored mats that you're suggesting, and then maybe a gray frame to support it all. Now, I think this looks rather striking with a white mat, but you gave us some tips separately about choosing the color of the mat versus the subject in the picture. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there's two sides of the story. The white mats are very easy to come by. You can buy them on the shelf in standard sizes, so that's convenient. They often only come in white or ivory, especially if it's an odd size like this one is a 9x12. So if you want to play the art as best it can, I would choose colors that complement it. unless you have a decor that dictates all white mats. If you're looking for a homogeneous look in all your art in one room, you might want to look at your idea for the whole room.
Being the same. And you had mentioned that the matte color shouldn't be brighter than the brightest color in the picture.
Unless you have the decor issue, but I personally don't like it when the white is whiter than the whitest part in the art because it makes the art look dull.
Makes sense. So it'll be interesting to see. We have what this looks like with the really bright white matte, and then we'll do our best to choose this color, which I think you said this color you want close to the picture, this color next to the frame, and then the frame to be gray. Interesting. I look forward to seeing what that looks like. Okay, so that's our plan for this beautiful piece. Okay, Helen, you're going to know what this piece is. So here we have a piece that was gifted to my husband and I by Kimberly Pulli. And today I'm getting Helen's tips on how she would mat and frame this piece. This piece is called Blossom, and Kimberly Pulli made this originally of her granddaughter, and then she taught the subject in a class on our school. So I'm getting Helen's ideas today. Of course, my husband gets to make the final choice. But as we were looking at it, Jordan brought in lots of frames for us to play with today. One of the things that came into the studio was this copper frame. And I thought, wow, not for the frame maybe, but we said maybe for the mat.
Yeah, you can get a metallic copper mat.
And I think, I don't know, we'll see if, Rodney agrees, but I loved how the copper played on the copper.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I like the distance that it gives you of the gray. It gives you the space to breathe and not be overwhelmed.
Oh, I like that, especially since the gray is on the perimeter and the copper is on the interior. But if that's the case, so the copper is the matte, what do you think for the frame color?
My initial reaction would be black.
Okay. We're just using what we have in the studio to get an idea. So just try and focus on the outside here. So I do think that looks really pretty. I think the copper with the black frame, I think that looks fantastic.
I think it's nice and bold, and I think that the art is bold.
Right. And my husband often chooses a black frame or something really within that black family. So we'll bring him this idea to look at. And I think, yeah, that would look really fantastic. Now, Helen, talking about how this piece is mounted to the foam core, tell us a little bit about that.
If it wasn't going to be matted, if it was just going into a frame.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
The foam core would come the size of the opening of the frame.
Okay.
And we would fold the edge under and use T-pins.
Right.
Like quilting pins. To kind of stretch it like you would stretch a canvas on a canvas stretcher.
Now, when we go to the frame shop, and if we don't want the piece to touch the frame, do we need to tell the framer that, or are they going to shoot for that already?
I wouldn't assume anything from who you're talking to. If you have a concern about the glass touching your art, make it known that that's your concern, and make it known that you would like spacers, especially because you don't know how high your art will be, and that will affect the size of the spacer.
Now, what if someone's doing this themselves? Are there some, what are some suggestions for spacers?
So you can go to the craft store or a hardware store and get a little skinny piece of balsa wood or little 1/4-inch molding, and you can put it in between the glass and the art.
Okay. And so just something like you would cut with a hacksaw. Then you're saying
sometimes you can even use scissors. There's the balsa wood and
little flat pieces. Okay.
As long as you don't see it from the front of the frame, and if you do see it, you might want to paint them ahead of time.
That's a good tip.
So they match the frame.
Oh, that's a really good tip. Very cool.
You can use the spacers if you have no mat. Usually, if you have a mat, especially a double mat, there'll be enough room in between your art and the glass.
Gotcha. Okay. That's very helpful. Okay, cool. I look forward to seeing this one ready too. I have a very special piece here now. These are all special pieces, obviously. Every one I'm just kind of gushing over. This piece was just given to us recently, and it was given to us by Noelle Russow. I think you probably saw it in the Facebook group.
I did. It's beautiful.
Yeah, she's a member of our community. She spent over 200 hours making this beautiful piece. So thank you, Noelle. We're absolutely enamored with it. And this was her vision of like the living felt business and farm. Yeah, so she came up with this inspired by this beautiful round barn. And there's a story behind every element within this piece. It's just absolutely fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the things we should think about when framing this particular piece, Helen.
So she spent a lot of time on this edge, and it would be a shame to lose it in under a mat. But if you do want to have a mat, it is going to have to cover some of it.
Right.
My first thought was to use a similar color mat. You probably won't find something that matches exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Similar, but not, it doesn't have to match exactly. It's going to be near impossible to get it to match exactly. And you don't want something that clashes either. So don't sacrifice to get it close if it's going to clash. That being said, if you can get something that's a color like this that is a little darker but goes nicely, I would ask the framer to make a reverse bevel so you don't see the white edge of the mat board interrupting the art to the mat.
And so this is an example of a colored interior border that does not have the reverse bevel. And you can see that white.
The little white pinstripe is very prominent. And the reason I'm saying that is the art will not be perfectly square. So see how it, even if you try to line it up perfectly, it's wider here at the bottom and narrower at the top.
Yes.
To minimize the obvious not straightness of it, if you don't see that white line and you have two similar colors, it's not going to be obvious.
Great. So we'll get a reverse. We'll try and match this inner color to this or this somewhere there, and we'll get a reverse bevel so we don't see the white. Mm-hmm. And then what about the next layer of matting? What color should that be?
I was thinking something neutral so that the colors of the piece really shine. So something that relates to the art.
Okay.
But doesn't compete with it.
Okay.
So my first instincts were probably a light gray, maybe...
Very subtle.
Maybe a cool gray, maybe somewhere in between. But you can bring examples to the shop and find something that is similar.
Mm-hmm. So our inner mat is going to be narrow, like this. And then the next level of our mat will be how wide, Helen, would you say? Like this wide? I know you said it depends on the...
go under 1.5 inches.
Oh, so this is about 1.5 inches. So it's going to be 1.5 inches to 2 inches. Mm-hmm. Okay, 1.5 inches to 2 inches. And then looking at this side of the picture where there's a lot of gray, which one do you think is the most complementary if I get rid of the white label, just get the white label out of our visual? Which is the most complementary? I could even stretch these out, come to think of it. So we don't have, maybe this particular fabric.
That's a good idea.
But if this is it was a great idea of yours to get the fiber out. I like that. So this might be how that looks. And then what color? That's a gray mat. So it really makes the picture look interior, doesn't it? It's like it tucks it in. And it really feels like there's a little world in there, doesn't it? So then let's look at the lighter gray.
I think the lighter one's going to be better.
Oh, do you? Okay, cool. Let's look at it. This is fun. This is a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I like the lighter one.
This is the one? It's a lighter frame. And what do you think that does? Like, help educate us. What do you see in the lighter one versus the darker one?
I thought the darker one just looked heavy. It weighed it down too much, and I think this gives you a little more breathing room, some space for your eye to relax. Okay.
And then the frame, we talked about maybe a brown frame. So here's just a real earthy brown, and the frame would probably be, is the frame wider than this part of the mat? So if this mat's about the same?
It could be either a lot thinner, so there's a contrast. I just don't like it when they match.
And so, Okay, when they match the width.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's pretend just for a moment, just for our eye to see.
So you want some variety, but I like the colors. I feel like there's a lot of brown in the picture, and it's a outdoor farm picture.
Now, if someone were covering matting a landscape like this, but they didn't have this border, do you think a white mat would work? I mean, I think that just makes the picture look so vibrant. But is it so she's got really white stitching in there? Do you think, like, if it ends up that we're not going to be able to be graceful about the border and we need to cover it, do you think that a white mat works?
I think it's a little too bright for this.
Too stark?
It's a personal choice, and because a lot of people have only white mats in their art.
Yeah.
So it's a thing. Some people will sacrifice it for the aesthetics of just having white mats.
Right. Just matching.
They're purists.
Just matching a room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I really look forward to seeing how this one comes out. And you know what? Something we haven't really talked about, Helen, is glass.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different levels of glass, and I know that, in my house, my husband always gets the, non-glare museum glass, but that can be rather pricey for people. So can you talk us through what should we be thinking about when we go to frame our pieces?
So you want to think about the size. The size of this one, I wouldn't use glass. I would use acrylic, and acrylic comes in museum quality and a standard. So it would be your choice price-wise. It's the same kind of difference between regular glass and museum quality glass.
But why wouldn't you use glass?
It's weighty,
Mm-hmm.
it's heavy,
Mm-hmm.
and if it falls, it's going to shatter.
Uh-huh. Okay, but it's okay to use the acrylic instead of glass?
I like the acrylic because it's lighter, it's shatterproof, and it gives you, I think, an even better view of the art when you compare the museum quality acrylic to the museum quality glass.
Okay, so is there a time when you do choose glass?
Smaller pieces,
Okay.
and that's pretty much it.
Just for smaller pieces?
Yeah, I wouldn't, if it was over 11 by 14, that's where I would go to the acrylic.
Okay, so acrylic over 11 by 14 for the weight, for the safety,
Mm-hmm.
the preservation, and you're saying it's really comparable, if not a better representation of the art beneath. And then what about, I know we talked earlier about buying acrylic inserts for our circular frames off Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Any other guidance on, when we go to frame, what we should be looking at as far as the glass goes?
Whatever you choose at a professional frame shop is going to look good.
Okay.
Even if you choose the least expensive option, it's still going to look nice.
Okay.
So don't worry if that's what your budget affords.
Okay. And then what about if we're just doing off the shelf? Is there anything I'll have to tell you that my experience with off the shelf is I choose something that has character and it ends up being not a very high quality frame and it falls apart. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, it's falling apart and then I never use it or it falls apart after I'm using it. So what am I doing wrong? What should we be looking for at off the shelf type of frames, especially if we're wanting to preserve our art or gift our art or sell our art? What should we be looking for?
So if you're buying an off-the-shelf frame, let the buyer know, or let the person, well, you don't have to let the person you've gifted it to, but you could let the buyer know that it can be reframed.
Right.
Because they don't last as long.
Okay.
And
Off-the-shelf frames as a rule.
General, unless you're paying for the fancy ones, like those ones at Jerry's, those are very fancy off the shelf.
Okay, so if you want a higher quality place, then you might have to seek a place like Jerry's Artorama.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about Blick. I've never bought frames from Blick, but I bought their mat, their mat systems there. But maybe the big box stores, you should go to the framing department if the quality really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think those are good tips. Well, what we're going to do is take your suggestions, Helen, and we have homework now to go, and we want to, some of these ideas will play out in the store, and some of them, I think your experience shows, people will make a different decision.
Yeah, and
when they're there.
If you get there and this doesn't hit you as this is magical, and you change to completely different colors, that's a common occurrence.
Okay.
But you can go in with a plan.
Yeah.
So it's always good.
I appreciate that. So thank you for helping us with our plan,
You're
Helen.
welcome.
And we're going to get to work and see about getting these things ready to hang.
Great.
Thank you. Hey y'all, we've had a little time since Helen's visit to explore the framing guidance that she gave us. So let's look at what we've done so far. We'll start by looking at these pieces and go over what Helen recommended, what we explored to see what worked, what didn't, and what we ended up with. Starting with these two pieces, we really love the options for round frames. Helen suggested that we go to Jerry's Artorama for round frames, and I did. This one is not that. Those frames the round frame started at $50 on sale, and I really wanted to give you an option that was less expensive. This frame comes with a plexiglass, whereas the one from Jerry's Artorama came with nothing. And it's very inexpensive. It's from Amazon. I think we paid around $20 for this frame, and it's very simple like you expect. You just slide these little back pieces, and it has this little tiny hanging apparatus, which you could probably improve upon. But what we love about this frame is that it doesn't try and overtake the artwork. There's not a lot of sheen on this finish, and it would also be fantastic for traveling to shows, displaying your artwork, and not worrying about ruining an expensive frame or getting the glass banged up. It would also be a great way to package something if you want to sell it to a customer, if you add the cost of the frame plus. This little frame we chose for our Hidden Lake needle felt piece. This is a kit that you can get from us, and this hoop is designed to hold an embroidery hoop in the back. I did that with an embroidery hoop to the back, and I'm going to show you in a second. It's a tension frame, but what happened is the piece was sagging. So instead of the embroidery hoop, we put a little piece of foam core in the back, and at this time I have not attached it with glue yet. But all that you do is you take your piece and you slide it under these little elastic bands here. And mine wasn't quite tight enough, so I just tied another knot, and then we can cut these off. So this is a very casual frame, but it does look very elegant. And again, there's no glass in this piece. We like the felt just being kind of out in the open on these two without any glare. So two very affordable options. This one's about 20 and this one's about 15. We got them both on Amazon, so we will share those links with you. Both of these felt pieces were cut to fit with an embroidery hoop and were displayed with an embroidery hoop before we put them in a frame. And in that case, they both fit well within these frames. So this one was in a 12-inch hoop, and this little guy was in a 6-inch hoop. I used the outer part of the embroidery hoop to trim the foam core so that it was bigger than the hole, and it just had to be able to mash up against the back of the frame. So you can cut them for embroidery hoops and then frame them later. For a number of our pieces, we went with Shadowboxes, and I'm going to show you why. With the Shadowbox frame and organic edges, what we like is you can show off all those organic edges. You just need to choose the color of the frame and the color of the background that will most support the colors in the piece. For this snowy piece, we could try a colored background, but I like that the white just muted out to the other whites, and all of our focus is on the color in this beautiful winter scene, which was needle felted by Anna Repke. Something else about these Shadowbox frames is they have nice hanging apparatus on the back, so you can run a wire for a proper gallery hanging, and also that there's no side seams because the glass is integrated. So that made it a little hard for us to show off the piece for you without the glare, but you can have a look and see how nice these frames look because that glass is already integrated in the build. And this is a really nice way to show off a beautiful piece. Now, all the Shadowbox frames that we're showing you today came from Hobby Lobby. I bought them on sale. The category was 50% off, so you definitely want to take advantage of that. And these are 11 by 14 frames. We've attached this piece to the back of the Shadowbox frame. This is the backing that comes with it. It comes with a color. If you don't like that color, you could put felt or some other fabric over this if you wanted. I chose the white, and right back here we have little hidden pins underneath the piece. So here it was thick enough that I could just pin it. This back is cushioned, so you can pin things right to it, and it's great for changing it out. And then we integrated pins in all the corners. So you want the weight to hang evenly. This is a very lightweight piece, but some areas down here was a little more challenging, and the pin is sitting right on the face, and you wouldn't even notice it in most cases unless it's pointed out. So Shadowbox frames are great for temporary hangings or long-term when you just want to see the entire piece and have it all shown off and not bound by any mat or any other color. So this next piece is these beautiful koi fish that were felted for us by Helen Russell, who's given us all these awesome tips today. This piece I thought was so striking and beautiful that I really wanted it to pop off the back. So we went with the black on black Shadowbox frame. That's because I just wanted to show every millimeter of this piece, and it was so beautifully cut, very even, and it just really jumps off of the black background. So we thought Shadowbox frame was perfect for this one as well. For the last floating frame that we're looking at today, I went with white on white, and this is for the Wishing Willow that was felted for me by Valerie Dunne in Ireland. I loved how the green popped off the white, and I just love that there's so many options for frames like this. So this frame, Helen had mentioned to us that sometimes a frame's style can be dictated by the other pieces that it's hanging with. And this piece is hanging in a room with another piece of fiber art that we hung in the same frame. So even though they're really quite different, two white on white Shadowbox frames housing fiber art kind of times the two together into a great theme. So I love using these when you want to show off these organic edges, and white was the perfect color because of the bright white in the piece. So as I mentioned, I got all of these Shadowboxes on sale. I think they were 50% off. I believe I paid around $20 a piece for them. This last piece that we're going to look at is near and dear, not just to my heart, but all of us here at Living Felt. And this was an amazing surprise gift given to us by Noelle Russow, who you all would know if you're in our Facebook group. And if you're not, get on over there. Noelle spent over 200 hours felting this idyllic fantasy vision of the Living Felt farms, which that's a fantasy too. We don't really have a farm. We do work with farms, but she created this piece. The barn came from like a barn book, actually. The colors are very much built on a color that we use a lot. And she just created this beautiful piece right down to having our little address on a plate and established 2004 on the gate, hand stitching the fence line. It's such an amazing piece of work. So we wanted to do something very special with it, and feel so grateful that Helen was here to give us advice. So one of the things that Helen said was the mat should not be brighter than the lightest part of the piece. And while we do have this really bright white string or thread running through the piece with this hand stitching, overall the brightest white, is really a very natural ecru white, like our cotton white MC1. It's very muted and very toned down, so we didn't want the mat to compete with it. I spent a lot of time at the framer following all of the advice that Helen gave me. And over, the framer kept wanting to honestly push me in a different direction. And in my heart and in my being, I had to follow what Helen told me and what I was feeling. So we chose this mat to go with the frame. And I don't know whether it shows a little brighter on your screen, but this is a barnwood wood that has like a milky white finish and undertones of brown gray. Not brown, not gray, but like a brown gray. And I did choose to mat this piece, though with a similar, it's actually very light gray on the register. And you'll see that the bevel cut is the same color. So it's a solid color matte, and I didn't want it to take away from the piece. I wanted all the focus to be like for you to just be drawn into this beautiful little world that she's created. So with that, I did decide to mat it because the framer wanted me to, potentially show all of this perimeter. But what I knew is if we showed the perimeter trim that Noelle put on there, then we would also be looking at the background and its offset, whether it was even or not even. And because it was narrow, it was only about that wide, there wasn't enough room for it to float out. So we did choose to matte it. I think it still looks fabulous. You can still see the color even though it's not perfectly consistent. When I look at this piece, I don't judge that this magenta trim is not perfectly even. Instead, I just fall into this scene and want to be right there. So we really wanted to honor this piece. It is professionally mounted at Hobby Lobby. You could also do that at Michael's or your local framer. It takes a little time. You take your artwork in, you look through the mats, just like Helen told us, and it was a much more overwhelming than I thought it would be. I think we spent about 45 minutes going through trying different mats. And the only reason it took so long was I kept listening to the framer rather than listening to myself. And in the end, I went with what Helen told me, and that's a mat that matches the average lightest color in the piece, and then a frame that I thought really honored the work and, resonated with the theme of the artwork. When you get your piece mounted and framed at the big box store, they're going to do you right. I love how they're finished. They're finished with a professional paper that's been adhered to the back of the frame. They set it up for you so that it's ready to hang on your wall. And they also put these little rubber bumpers on the bottom so that it will hang well on the wall and not swing. So that's a real nice touch that they finish it off that way. Helen frames professionally, and we're so grateful that she shared so much insight with us. There's so much I didn't know, even though I have a lot of pieces that are already professionally framed in my home and our business, but my husband has handled all of those. So I want to share with you some of the pieces that we do have professionally framed and pick up on some of the lessons that Helen shared with us. This first piece that we're looking at is a felted Bhudda that was created for me by Kimberly Pulli. I'll share a few pieces by Kimberly Pulli, and we'll go over some of the nuances of those framings. And in looking at this one, you can see straight away one of the first things that Helen told us was, don't let the mat be any brighter than the lightest tone of the piece. And I think these two are in perfect harmony so that all of our focus is on the artwork centered in this really wide mat. And the colors of the frame are very much in harmony with all of the earth tones in this piece. On a little closer look, this piece is actually a great beige sandy color and fits very well with the tones that we see, these really earthy tones that we have here in this piece. But it's also what she told us was a reverse bevel. So the mat is cut, but you can't see any other color. So I think she told us that that's when they flip it over and you don't see the bevel. It just runs a real straight line. Now, my husband is the one who had this piece framed, not me. So he's really good at that. And I just know that I see it and I appreciate it. And I feel I kind of picked up some things based on what Helen told us. I love the super wide mat with the thin frame. And then when this is hanging on the wall, it lives in my office. All the focus is on this Bhudda, which was felted for me by the very talented Kimberly Pulli. We looked at her blossom piece, and that piece is still yet to be hung and framed because my husband gets to choose. It's the piece is really for him. But I wanted to share a few other Kimberly Pulli pieces with you that we have had framed. And this is one. So a very neutral mat to go with these neutral colors and no other color showing along the perimeter of the mat. So all of these pieces that you're seeing here from Kimberly Pulli were also framed at Hobby Lobby. Just remember, you can go to Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or your local framer, and your experience will be very similar. I hope this has been informative. Helen, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Welcome. I only wish that she was just right down the road and we could go to her for all our framing needs. If you had fun with this, I hope that you will keep an eye out for Helen's tutorial in the school. Autumn Creek, it's a 2D felting landscape. Guaranteed you're going to have a great time, and she's going to give you some more framing and mounting tips in that one. And you can also check out her What Felting an Octopus video. Check her out on Instagram at
HR Felt Stuff.
HR, Felt and Stuff. Check her out, you guys. Thank you so much for felting with us. We have more mounting and framing videos and lots more in the 2D playlist. So have fun with that, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.